Hello and welcome. Now, if you're a parent with a newborn baby and are concerned or anxious if your baby is putting on enough weight, then you're in the right place. Did you know that it's common for a newborn baby to lose up to 10% of their birth weight? And as another question, did you know how long it takes for your newborn baby to get back to their birth weight? And of course, as another question, what can you do to help support this? Well, lucky for us today, our special guest, Belinda Joyce, will tell us this and many other expert tips and advice related to your newborn's health, weight, and just feeding patterns overall. Now, a little bit about our guest. Belinda is a midwife, maternal and child health nurse with over 20 years experience. Now, she's also a mother of four and author of Survive and Enjoy Your Baby. Now, her passion is in providing safe, evidence-based advice and options to parents so they can find their own path to parenthood. Welcome back, Belinda. How are you?
I'm really well, Rach. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's great to be catching up with you again. And 20 years experience in the industry is really incredible. And during, I guess, all of that time, I'd love to understand, how common have you found this particular topic coming up in your consultations with parents? And how often do you find that parents are concerned about their baby's weight gain and growth overall?
Look, I think it actually comes up very often on a day-to-day basis in our clinics, particularly in the maternal child health area, because I think so many people see us coming with the scales and they bring their babies in to be weighed, but really our consultation is a lot more than that. And sometimes the focus is too much on weight. Having said that, if a baby's not putting on enough weight, it can be extremely stressful for parents. So I guess if we can just look at what's normal and what's not, and try and take some of that anxiety away.
Yeah. And do you find that often and too often that I guess too much emphasis is put on babies' weight gain as realistically there's a large variation of what's considered normal in babies' growth and development?
Absolutely. So if we look at the growth charts, 50% of all babies will be above the 50th centile and 50% will be below. And so many new parents really think that their baby should be in that top half, as if that's an achievement or something that we should be aiming for. And it's really not. We know that there should be a really good spread across the whole centile chart of all healthy babies. So there should be 50 really healthy babies above and 50 below, and that's completely normal. So there's no real aim there for average or above.
Okay. There's lots of information to cover in this. So just wanted to acknowledge initially, we published your article and the title is Is My Newborn Putting on Enough Weight? Now, for someone who hasn't read the article yet, can you please tell us what it's about and of course, just what inspired you to write it?
I guess parents being really worried about their baby's weight gain and that anxiety that it produces is what made me want to write it. And it covers the norm of babies losing weight and how much weight they should gain, how we monitor that, and what to do when things aren't going as well as we'd like, perhaps with breastfeeding or with bottle feeding, and sort of the next steps to take in that journey.
So initially then, how normal is it, I guess, for newborn babies to lose weight then?
Look, it's normal for all newborn babies to lose up to 10% of their birth weight in the initial few days of life. So it's shocking for most new parents. You would just assume that your baby will grow. But early on, they're born with lots of extra fluids on board, and they're actually set up ready for an initial few days of getting very little feed. And if they're breastfeeding, they're just getting colostrum, and colostrum is a super concentrated mixture, I guess, that comes before the breast milk comes in, and it's really small quantities. So babies always will lose some weight. If they're bottle fed from birth, they still will lose a little bit in those initial few days because they can only take in small amounts of milk. And they are set up physiologically for this to happen. So it's nothing that we're concerned about, although in the hospital we will usually try and weigh a baby before they head home if it's been a couple of days, just to double check how much weight they have lost and document that.
That's really comforting to know, no doubt, for many parents watching and listening this. So then I guess the next question is, now, how long does it take a healthy baby who is feeding well, either breastfeeding or bottle feeding, of course, to get back to their birth weight then?
Most babies will get back to their birth weight and beyond within 2 weeks or 3 weeks at the maximum,
Yeah.
depending on how their feeding's been going, how big they were to start with, and how much weight they have lost.
Okay. So in those initial weeks, which you've just referenced earlier, I mean, how often should there be weight checks in the early weeks just to help avoid unnecessary worry? No doubt if you're going to be sort of weighing the baby every day, that's going to be of concern. Or, I mean, how often should that
Yes.
happen?
We wouldn't want to weigh a baby any more frequently than every 48 hours. And that's because babies, the changes in weight we're looking at are so small, and babies are they're taking their feeds, whether it's breast or bottle, and then they're also passing urine and doing poos as well. And they whatever goes in has to come out. So if we're weighing too often, we're not getting, enough time to see if we're weighing weight being put on or just milk in their tummy. And also we don't want to weigh, one day straight after a feed and the next day before a feed, because it can look like they've lost weight when in fact they haven't lost any weight. And we don't want to produce, anxiety in parents for no reason at all.
Yeah. And on that, I guess with weighing, scales can notoriously have discrepancies. Mine at home are always telling me I'm heavier than I think I am. So, but when it comes to babies in particular, when the scales are, if they've been weighed in different centres or in different services, can cause unnecessary stress for parents. How can parents, I guess, try to avoid this, add into their worries?
When we weigh the babies straight after birth, it's usually in the hospital, and then they head home and they're weighed perhaps by a maternal child health nurse in their home or at a centre or even at their GP practice, and all the scales can be a little bit different. They shouldn't be, and many services try and calibrate their scales fairly regularly to make sure they're not out. But getting put in and out of cars and things like that is enough for them to sometimes not be quite right. So the best way to avoid that is to keep getting your baby weighed on the same set of scales by the same person, if possible.
If possible. Yeah. Great advice. And, getting back to what you were mentioning before about mums who are breastfeeding, what tips and advice can you share to help to ensure that babies are receiving enough nourishment from the breast? Then it's going to help with their growth and development.
Yeah, absolutely. With breastfeeding, it's really important to breastfeed your baby on demand rather than timing feeds. So let the baby feed when they're hungry. And some people will say never wake a sleeping baby, but in those initial first few days or even weeks, it's really important to get lots of frequent feeds in. It sets down how much milk will be available in the next few months. So it's really important to get lots of feeds in, occasionally waking the baby if they're sleeping for really long periods, just to set up that good supply. But be guided by your healthcare professionals, absolutely, because if every circumstance is different, and it's really important to be guided by your own professionals who are with you at the time. So your midwives, lactation consultants, and doctors, just to make sure that your baby's getting what they need.
And of course, in your book, you reference a lot of information, support, tips and advice about breastfeeding. There's a couple chapters, I think, that you mentioned it. Is that right?
That's right. There's a chapter on breastfeeding and a chapter on bottle feeding. Both talk about, starting out with that feeding method, and also the weight gain that we'd expect, and who to see for assistance and support with feeding your baby and growth.
Okay. So besides what you had just mentioned earlier, just taking a step back as to what happens after the birth and the reason for the baby losing up to 10% of their birth weight, what else could prevent babies from gaining weight? And are there any other common illnesses, maybe like reflux or allergies or anything like that, that we should sort of take into consideration at all?
Yeah, look, if a baby's not gaining weight, and if say they were breastfeeding, and we've looked at the breastfeeding, really tried to look at whether they're sucking and swallowing and there's a good milk supply. With bottle feeding, the same thing, looking at, is the formula being made up the right way, and is the baby sucking and swallowing well, and how often they're feeding, and sort of looking at all of those things. Once we rule those out as all looking good, then we really want to look for a medical reason, and it's really very important then that that the baby is examined by a doctor, so just your family GP or a paediatrician if you're seeing one, to have a good head to toe look over to see if there's anything medically that could be causing the lack of weight gain. Most times babies are given a clear bill of health, but it's really important to rule out something as little and I guess minor as a urinary tract infection or something else that you can't really see, that could be affecting your baby and stopping them from being, I guess, at optimum health. And, all the energy is going to looking after them and keeping them well rather than to putting on and gaining weight. So we always just want to, I guess, err on the side of caution, and get that checked out as well.
So, should there be any problems with the baby putting on weight, how do parents know what healthcare professional they should take their baby to see initially then?
Yeah, so in most states, there's either maternal child health or child health nurses that will organise to come and see you or get you to come into their clinics. There's always the GP. If you're breastfeeding, it's always a good idea to see a lactation consultant if you're having some challenges, and it's pretty common to have challenges in the early weeks and months of breastfeeding, and a lactation consultant really is the specialist in that situation. They are really good at pinpointing and troubleshooting and really getting to the bottom of what's causing a problem. And they also have the time in their consultations to spend just on feeding, which is fabulous because the rest of the health professionals usually have a huge amount to get through in a consultation that's not just feeding.
Yeah.
And pediatricians as well are really great to talk to about your baby's health. Obviously, that's their specialty.
As well. Great advice. And getting back to bottle feeding as well, what about mothers who are bottle feeding? What techniques, I guess, and advice can you share that could be sort of helpful?
With bottle feeding, it's really important that you're using, a suitable teat for the age of your baby. So a newborn teat for a newborn baby, it means the milk flows a little bit slower so that they can cope with it. And even if they're really hungry and they're sucking really hard, it's not going to overflow, and it's not, they'll be able to manage it. Making up the formula with the right amount of scoops to the right amount of water is also really important, and some people get that mixed up, so checking that with your healthcare professional is also a great idea. Making sure that you're not offering any extra fluids, so if they're having formula they don't need plain water as well, because that will fill up their tummy and then they're not taking in the fluid, the milk that actually has the calories in it that help them gain weight and give energy. So just making sure that you're sort of sticking to, I have to say, all of those pieces of advice are also on the label of your formula can. It's worth reading the whole instructions, I guess, just to make sure that you are doing it correctly, because a lot of work has gone into making sure that that is the right amount of energy and calories for your baby at that age.
Mm. It's getting back to what you're saying about the bottled teat. It's such a competitive space with businesses, and of course we speak to a lot of them. I don't want to mention one over the other, but they really are doing their best with technology to try and replicate the breast as easy and as best as possible. So this is just a question off the cuff, but you're mentioning that the teat, the bottle teat, should be reference to the right age of the baby. So
Yes.
how is that different to a breast that is not changing? Or is a natural breast, a mum that is breastfeeding, changing, as a question? So if we're sort of then using technology and people that are formula feeding are giving and are upgrading or changing the actual bottle and the teat itself as the baby's growing, how is a mother's breast changing or not?
That's a really interesting question, I have to say. So, absolutely, with a bottle, we would be changing the teat over time, and it doesn't matter how much technology they put into manufacturing those teats, they never really can get them to function the same way that a breast and a nipple functions. The nipple during a breastfeed actually stretches all the way to the back of the baby's throat. And it's meant to do that. It doesn't cause damage to do that. It's not painful to do that, but it is surprising to most people that it stretches that far. Over time, the breast doesn't really change so much as the baby's ability to suck and remove the milk quicker over time is probably the main thing that changes. With a breast, the way the baby behaves and sucks, that will change the way the milk is removed. Whereas with a teat that's, I guess, not physiologically made for a baby to be using, it doesn't have that same ability. So we have to actually change the teat. I'm not sure if that's the best answer to that
No,
question, but it's a really good question.
Thank you, because it's just something that I just realized now, because we're developing all this technology around the bottle feeding. But I mean, what's natural, of course, is a mother's body. So I just wondered, you know, thank
Look,
you.
by say 4 months of age, most babies would be breastfeeding for between say 3 and 5 minutes on each breast and have removed large amounts of milk, over 100 ml of milk. Whereas in the early days, they might take 20 to 40 minutes on each side to get that same amount of milk. So their ability and efficiency at the breast, just sucking from the breast, actually increases enormously in a short period of time.
So getting back to formula just for a moment, then how do parents know which formula is best for their baby then? Because that's another competitive space again.
Yes, it is. And the National Health and Medical Research Council infant feeding guidelines is what we use, I guess, in Australia as health professionals to be guided by. And a lot of research has gone into those guidelines. And really, they say that any regular cow's milk formula that is made for newborn babies is suitable. And the lowest protein that you're able to find is probably the best one to go with. And that's because there have been some links. They've found lots of links between high protein formula and overweight and obesity in later life. So that the guidelines are really saying you don't need any special formulas with very special ingredients, just a regular cow's milk formula from birth is all you need. There's no need to change it at 6 months, regardless of what some of the packaging suggests to do. You can remain on that same newborn formula all the way through to 12 months of age. And at that time, they can go straight on to cow's milk, just in small amounts though. They don't need milk all day long. By 12 months of age, they should be getting most of their nutrition from diet and eating.
Right.
Yeah.
Just getting back to the weight gain, and I know This information is included in the article that you wrote, which of course is included in the show notes, which anyone can click on that link and have a read. But I'd just love to know if you could just explain for us, what is the average weight gain for babies?
Yeah. So for a newborn baby, they're growing at the fastest pace, I guess. We would like them to be putting on at least 150 to 200 grams per week.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that sounds like a lot, but we have lots of babies that are putting on over 300 grams, and that's still normal. And then we have these other babies that are putting on more like the 100 grams, and you kind of think, well, it's not the 150, but they're growing and developing normally as well. So even though the gold standard is 150 to 200 grams, it can be a little bit either side of that and still be very normal. And we still find that most of those babies who are a little bit lower than that will grow and develop very normally. So it's more about looking at whether they're thriving in other aspects of their life as well, and whether they look healthy and well. By 3 months of age, though, it drops down to 100 to 150 grams per week, and that's really normal, and they should be slowing down. You will notice a difference in them not growing out of their clothes quite as quickly. In the first few weeks of life, they'll probably already grow out of clothes, and then it will slow down a little. And then from 6 to 12 months, we're looking at sort of 70 to 90 grams a week of growth. But I guess not checking it anywhere near as often as they get older either. It's just not important.
And so the growth charts, which you've referenced and also included in the article, mean should babies' growth actually follow that growth chart? And can you maybe speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, sure. So we use the WHO, the World Health Organization growth charts in Australia and for babies, and they're great charts because they're based on healthy, well, generally breastfed babies. So they're giving us the average sort of weight gain we're looking for, and that variance in weight gain as well. So we've got the 100 centiles, and somewhere over that your baby will chart. We're looking for them to generally sort of go along a little bit like the chart, but remembering that they're an actual baby and not data. So on the charts, you'll see these beautiful curves, and we'll expect your baby to sort of go a little bit like that curve. But a really big, chubby newborn baby might have parents who are quite fine built and, average height. And so they will gradually over time slow their growth down to probably match their parents. And a baby that's very tiny at birth might have quite large parents, and they might actually head upwards. And so we try and take into account, their genetic potential, the way they feed, all of those things into account before really judging that weight gain. If they're particularly low on the chart or extremely high on the chart, we will usually involve a doctor just to keep an eye on their growth as well. And sometimes they'll refer on to a paediatrician just to see them every couple of months and make sure that they're managing to grow fairly normally, and that there's nothing that we need to look into any further around medical issues.
And, as you mentioned earlier, most parents want their children to be above that 50% percentile. For whatever reason, I guess we sort of become accustomed to always wanting to be the best at what we can be, and all of those things that are being above the percentile means it's sometimes, in our minds better, but it's not always the case as you referenced and mentioned earlier. So what percentage is considered to be normal and healthy then?
Really anywhere on the chart, anywhere from, I think really the bottom 3% and the top 3% are the ones we keep the most, I guess, focus on those ones and just checking that there's not something we need to refer on for, but really all the babies in the middle, so from 3% all the way up to 97% is very normal. It's more about looking at that growth over time and also watching that it's not trending downwards every time we see them, that they're dropping lower and lower and lower, or gaining higher and higher and higher, both of which might be completely normal, but we just want to keep an eye on it and make sure that they get referred on to a medical professional to have maybe some extra tests, or even just, often it's just a consultation to look at what else might be going on. And in most cases, there's nothing going on, but in some cases there is. And that's why it's really important that any baby that's sort of hitting those criteria does get checked out.
And we've had a lot of focus on the scales and the weighing of the baby, but other than that, I mean, what are some other ways to know if, you know, your baby is gaining weight?
Yeah, so when you're at home, and particularly in the last year or so, where some babies went long distances between weights just because of lockdowns and all sorts of things like that, it's really important to be able to look at your own baby and try and see that they're growing. And you're not going to notice it day to day, but you will notice that their jumpsuits, you know, their toes no longer are fitting in and you're needing to go up to the next size, or maybe their nappies are getting really tight around their tummy or around their thighs because their thighs are getting really chubby, or you're noticing that they're getting the little rubber band wrists with the gorgeous rolls on their arms. Early on, just noticing all their output. So heavy wet nappies, when you take the nappy off and you sort of feel it in your hand, you think that is really heavy. They're growing. If that food is going through them, the milk, they will be growing. And also poos, obviously. You'll notice things like chubby cheeks starting, and perhaps a roll under their chin, which is very cute. Some babies never will be a chubby baby, and they don't have to be a chubby baby, but they are, I guess, some of the things that you might see along the way that just put your mind at rest that they are actually growing and changing. And another great thing is when you see a friend or perhaps a grandparent or something, and they say, oh my goodness, your baby's grown so much since I saw them last. Because you don't notice, you're seeing them day to day, it's really reassuring to have that happen as well. So it's not just the numbers on the scale that are important.
Yeah. And in your article, you list a whole heap of other ones, for example, like growing out of their clothes in length and width, getting too large for their bassinet, even just feeling heavier to carry and taking up more space in their car seat. So there's a list of others in your article. Of course, it will have the link in the show notes. We've covered a lot today. But I'd just love to know from your perspective, what are the key messages that you would love any parent, any key takeaways to be able to remember from this chat today?
I'd like to just try and take some of the pressure off parents to have a big, heavy baby, or for their baby to be gaining huge amounts of weight. In most cases, it's not necessary, and it's not something that we're all aiming for either. And to know that if their baby's not gaining enough weight, and if perhaps their maternal child health nurse is a little bit concerned about it, be guided by that, and go and see your GP or a lactation consultant and get that extra help, just to rule out anything else that's going on, and to give you some more support to help your baby reach their full potential. But really, it's just to take the pressure off.
Awesome. Now, if parents have got any questions that they would like to reach out to you after this, and of course would like to be able to purchase your book, your wonderful book, whereabouts can they find you?
Now, I'm at belindajoyce.com. Come to the website. There's a contact me. There's a lot of blog posts on that website as well, as the book's available there, as well as in all good bookstores.
And also in the Kiddipedia store as well, which they can purchase from there.
Absolutely.
As well. Thank you so much for your time today, Belinda. As always, it's an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I can't wait to chat to you again in the not too distant future. But in the meantime, stay safe and take care. Bye.
Thanks, Rach.
Bye.